You'd think after generating over $118 million in recurring revenue over 5 years, someone, anyone, might believe I had a head for leadership. But no. Not when your last name is Cruz and your older brother is Lucas Cruz, golden boy of Stratagem Solutions, Austin's poster child for bold innovation and corporate ego. He had the square jaw, the golf handicap, and the strategic mind of a half-eaten sandwich. But he talked like he owned the air in the room, and too many people just let him. The meeting room smelled like fresh polish and tension. 10 of us sat around the oak conference table that probably cost more than my first car. I had prepped for this pitch for weeks, mapping out supply chain efficiencies for our Southern division that could save the company $4.3 million annually. I had the slides, the research, even projections tailored to each department's KPIs. I was halfway through my pitch when Lucas cut in, loud and casual, as if we were at some family barbecue, not a quarterly strategy review. "Mel, that's good stuff, but let's not overcomplicate things. You're a great team player, not a leader. Let's table it and circle back next quarter." He said it with a chuckle, like I'd just recommended we replace the vending machines with kale. The room went quiet. Even our CEO, Greg Walton, said nothing. Just tilted his head like he was watching a tennis match and didn't want to interrupt. My cheeks burned. I smiled because that's what women are taught to do when we've been publicly slapped. Smile and pretend it didn't sting, but it did. I gathered my laptop, nodding like this was all perfectly reasonable. No one stopped me. No one asked questions about my proposal. And no one, least of all Lucas, thanked me for the 11 months I'd spent untangling the data mess his team had left behind. Outside the boardroom, I made it all the way to the women's restroom before I let out a single breath. You'd think I'd be used to it by now. After all, this wasn't the first time. I've been with Stratagem since 2008. I started as a data analyst, making $58,000 a year, fresh off my MBA and still paying off student loans. Lucas came in 2 years later. No MBA, but plenty of vision, whatever that means when you don't read spreadsheets. By 2015, he was vice president of strategic growth. I was still senior manager of operations, running 3 departments without the title or the bonus. I kept my head down, hit my targets, built the pipelines, trained new managers. My teams exceeded their goals 9 quarters in a row. Lucas took my forecast to pitch investors. I got mentioned in the footnotes of his slide decks. Once. I should have said something, demanded a seat at the table. But when you grow up as the younger sibling of a boy like Lucas, you learn early how to shrink yourself just enough to stay out of the blast zone. Back in our shared childhood, he got the big room with the ensuite bathroom. I got the attic office, converted space with a sloped ceiling and a radiator that hissed like it was judging me. In the workplace, not much changed. That same week, HR informed me I'd been reassigned, effective immediately, not promoted, not fired, reassigned, to the Innovation Lab. Now, to the untrained ear, that might sound exciting, futuristic, cutting edge, but anyone in our company knew it was a euphemism. The Innovation Lab was where projects went to die. It was a glass-walled exile on the 3rd floor with no direct reports, no executive budget, and no meaningful oversight. Just an open calendar and a vague directive to explore new verticals. Translation: sit quietly, don't cause trouble, and be grateful you're still on payroll. I stared at the memo for a long time, rereading the email like it might morph into something dignified. Instead, it said, "Melanie, we believe your skills will thrive in a more creative, low-pressure environment. You'll be free to explore blue sky thinking without the burden of direct accountability." Without the burden. Direct accountability was my superpower. I was the one who turned around a $22 million loss in our Latin American division in 2020 when everyone else was too busy baking sourdough and hiding from COVID. But I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I accepted the promotion with a nod and a pleasant email reply. Thank you for the opportunity to contribute in new ways. I look forward to what's ahead. Then I packed my things, no ceremony, no farewell speech, and walked to the 3rd floor where the air smelled like recycled plastic and broken dreams. The lab was a glass cube with one desk, a couch, and a whiteboard that still had someone's 2022 doodles on it. A single plant sat dying on the windowsill. It felt like a scene from a post-apocalyptic sitcom. Bright lighting, no laughter, and a lot of silence. I sat in the rolling chair, stared at the plant and thought, so this is where careers come to fade. But something in me sparked. Maybe it was rage. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the soft voice I'd kept buried since I was 12, watching Lucas lie his way out of another mess while I cleaned up the fallout. But I realized, if they weren't going to see me as a leader, I'd stop asking them to. I'd build something so sharp, so undeniable, they'd have no choice. They'd look up and realize I wasn't in exile. I was in the perfect position, off their radar, out of their way, free to operate without interference. So I got to work. First, I updated the budget code for my lab, quietly reassigning a $600,000 innovation grant we'd been awarded in Q1. Technically, it was for experimental vertical exploration. That's what I was doing. No one asked questions. Then I called Jamie Liu in DevOps, brilliant, underutilized, and tired of Lucas's micromanagement. You want in? I asked. Are you even allowed to hire? I'm not sure, I said. But if anyone asks, you're on a 60-day rotation. Jamie laughed. I'm in. By the end of the first week, I had 5 people. 1 from procurement, 1 from user experience, 2 from logistics. All of them overlooked. All of them excellent. We met in that ugly glass box every morning at 8. I brought coffee and donuts. We scribbled ideas, reviewed pain points, and little by little, we started building something real. A solution to the biggest bottleneck in our operations, last-mile delivery scheduling. Lucas's department had been throwing consultants and dashboards at it for 18 months, burning $2.1 million in third-party contracts with no progress. We solved the core issue in 3 weeks. A simple AI-powered scheduling tool integrated with customer behavior data. Cost to implement? $92,000. Projected annual savings, $5.8 million. We tested it in 1 region. Satisfaction scores went up 27%. Delivery time variability dropped by 35%. Still, I said nothing. We didn't present. We didn't pitch. We just kept building, because I knew my moment would come. And when it did, it wouldn't be because I begged for a seat at their table. It would be because I brought my own. And when I did, I'd ensure Lucas knew who'd been just a team player. There's a particular kind of silence that only happens in exile. It's not the peaceful kind, like rocking on a porch with a good book. It's the kind that hums with shame and neglect, like being left behind at the airport and realizing nobody's coming back. But I wasn't planning on staying forgotten. I treated that glass cube like a laboratory, not the kind with beakers and goggles. This was my petri dish for proving everyone wrong, for showing them exactly what a team player could do when nobody was watching. The first weeks were scrappy. We didn't have a name for our group. Not officially. The internal org chart still had me floating in special initiatives, a no man's land where projects go to die. But unofficially, we called ourselves Team B, B for buried, bored, and better than them, I'd assembled them one by one, quietly, like a general recruiting for a secret war. There was Jamie from DevOps. She'd built Stratagem's automation scripts, but was always passed over for promotions because she wasn't polished, which is code for she didn't laugh at bad jokes in meetings. Then came Henry from procurement, a widower in his 50s, father of 3, who'd been shelved in a corner office after filing a harassment complaint against a VP. He knew the company's vendor relationships better than legal did. I brought in Tasha from UX, laid off twice but still freelancing for half the departments under consulting contracts. Her design mock-ups were cleaner than anything Lucas's team ever shipped. And finally, Lena from logistics, 20 years in shipping operations, ignored in favor of younger talent. But she knew every hiccup in our systems because she'd designed half of them. None of these people were flashy. None of them had Lucas's swagger or golf-smooth talk. But they were brilliant, efficient, loyal, and most importantly, they were fed up with being invisible. So we rolled up our sleeves and got to work. The problem on the table was one Lucas's team had burned through $1.2 million trying to fix delivery gridlock in the Southwest Corridor, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona. We were bleeding $480,000 a month in refunds, reroutes, and missed deliveries. Lucas had blamed the tech, the vendors, even the customers. He never once blamed the strategy. But I'd seen the real issue, a bloated dispatch algorithm that hadn't been updated in 3 years, and a field ops team so frustrated they were bypassing the system entirely. So we built something lean, a tool we nicknamed Quick Thread, real-time route prioritization based on actual field behavior, customer preferences, and predictive traffic patterns. We didn't use any flashy consultants. Just our own code, a whiteboard, and a few midnight takeout runs. We launched a pilot program in Tucson, quietly, under my lab's discretionary budget. Total cost? $94,000. In the first 30 days, delivery accuracy jumped 33%. Customer service complaints dropped by 40%. And we slashed overtime pay in the region by $102,000 in 1 month. No fanfare, no big announcement. We just let the numbers do what Lucas never did: speak. One morning, while sipping burnt coffee in our lab, the only kind the third floor seemed to stock, I got a ping on Slack from Greg Walton, our CEO. Interesting results from Tucson. Is this coming from your team? I stared at the message. He never wrote to me, not even when I'd led the Q4 recovery in 2021. I typed back, "Yes, happy to walk you through it if you're curious." He replied instantly, "Be in my office at 4. Bring whatever made that happen." My heart thudded, but I didn't let it show. I just smiled and clicked out of the chat. At 4 p.m. sharp, I walked into Greg's office, calm, prepared, not a single paper out of place. He was reviewing a printout of our data like it was a treasure map. "This quick thread thing," he said. "Lucas's team told me it wasn't feasible. Too complicated. You built this in a month?" I nodded. 32 days, technically, with a team of 5. He sat back. "How much funding do you need to scale it?" I almost laughed. I'd been fighting for crumbs, and now the CEO was offering me cake. "Give us $400,000, I said. "We'll expand to the entire Southwest Corridor in 90 days. You'll save double that by next quarter." He didn't even blink, just signed the transfer form on the spot. As I walked out of his office, I passed Lucas in the hallway. He was pacing, holding a coffee in one hand and his phone in the other, clearly mid-crisis. He didn't see me, or maybe he just didn't recognize me without the apologetic smile, because I wasn't smiling anymore. The next 2 weeks were a blur. We worked 12-hour days, rolled out the program in 5 more cities, trained dispatchers via Zoom at 7 a.m. and 9 p.m., and built dashboards executives could actually understand. I kept my head down. Let Lucas keep running his mouth in meetings while my work did laps around him. Then came the client meltdown. One of our biggest accounts, a national furniture retailer worth $28 million annually, threatened to pull out, missed deliveries, broken timelines. And of course, no one from Lucas's team had flagged it early. Greg called me in again. "Can you fix it?" he asked. I gave him a half smile. "Already on it." I spent the next 48 hours living on protein bars and sheer spite. We rerouted systems, personally called every affected customer, and even arranged same-day VIP deliveries for 3 high-priority clients. By Friday, the account manager called to say not only were they staying, they were increasing their order volume for Q3. Lucas tried to claim credit. He told the board he'd mobilized resources rapidly. I didn't say a word, because the CEO already knew. He asked me to present at the next leadership meeting, not Lucas, me. And that's when I knew. I wasn't just solving problems anymore. I was dismantling him, quietly, strategically, without ever raising my voice. My lab, that sad little exile, had become a launch pad. We weren't just building tools. We were rebuilding culture, systems, trust. One afternoon, Henry brought in cupcakes. Just because. We laughed, shared stories about old jobs. Nobody was afraid to speak up or ask dumb questions. It felt like leadership. Real leadership. Not the kind you inherit, but the kind you earn. Brick by brick, mistake by mistake, late night by late night. And all the while, Lucas kept spinning his wheels, unaware that his golden seat was wobbling, until the day he realized the floor had shifted beneath him. But that part? That's still coming. For now, I'll just say this. When they gave me the broom closet, they thought they'd buried me. But they didn't know I was a seed. And I had every intention of growing into a forest he couldn't burn down. You know that moment, right before a storm, when the air thickens and the birds go quiet? That's how the office felt the morning the Johnson Klein deal imploded. Now, for context, Johnson Klein was our $45 million baby. A luxury lifestyle brand expanding into smart home tech. High maintenance, demanding as hell, but prestige gold. They were Lucas's crown jewel, the one client he paraded around like a trophy wife. And he'd been blowing it for months. Delayed deliverables, overpromises, a flashy pitch deck, and no operational backbone. But Lucas was too busy glad-handing the VPs and perfecting his visionary leader LinkedIn posts to notice the client was getting cold. I'd heard whispers weeks before. A junior exec from marketing passed me in the kitchen and mumbled, "If Johnson Klein walks, we all know who fumbled it." I didn't ask. I didn't have to. Everyone knew. The storm finally broke on a Tuesday, mid-morning. I was in the lab with Jamie and Lena, reviewing expansion projections, when my phone buzzed, 3 times in a row. "Client threatening to cancel. CEO wants you upstairs, now." From Greg's assistant, Allie, who never used periods unless she was panicked. I didn't run. I walked. Deliberately. Let the dread simmer a bit. But not for me. For him. When I got to the conference room, the glass was already fogged with tension. Lucas was standing by the screen, red-faced, fingers clenched like a kid caught lying. Greg was seated at the end of the table, stone-faced. And next to him, surprisingly, was Dana Caldwell, one of our board members. Sharp eyes. Never missed a thing. Lucas didn't even acknowledge me. Just kept talking, rapid fire. "They're being unreasonable. We hit the delivery KPIs. Their scope kept changing. We were set up to fail. Greg looked over at me. Melanie, sit. Lucas, take a breath. Lucas stepped back, fuming. Greg turned to me. Johnson Klein wants to walk. They've got a competing offer from Nexus. I want you to fix it. Starting today. Lucas actually laughed. With respect, she hasn't been involved with the account. Which is why she still has their trust, Greg snapped. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just nodded and said, I'll need full access to all correspondence, contract revisions, and vendor logs by noon, and someone from legal on standby. Dana raised an eyebrow. That confident, Cruz? I met her gaze. Number just competent. And with that, I walked out. The next 72 hours were war. Not loud, not messy, surgical, precise. Every call, every email, every apology crafted like a scalpel. I dug through months of chaos, missed benchmarks, skipped QA cycles, a disastrous influencer campaign Lucas greenlit that cost $1.3 million and drove negative ROI. I personally called Caroline Park, Johnson Klein's COO. She was furious. I let her vent for 12 full minutes without interrupting. Then I said, You're right. We failed you. I can't undo the past, but give me 2 weeks and I'll show you what it looks like when we finally put substance over style. She paused. Then she said, You've got 5 days. So I made them count. Henry renegotiated the back-end shipping contracts, saving us $210,000 in penalties. Jamie rebuilt the client portal from scratch in 4 days flat. Tasha cleaned up the branding on their pitch assets, and Lena found 3 fulfillment centers in Arizona that could meet the new deadline with hours to spare. We didn't sleep much, but by day 5, the first shipments left our docks, on time, under budget, and with a customer service team trained to actually listen. Caroline called me directly. We're staying, she said, and I want you as the point of contact going forward. I thanked her, then hung up. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I could already hear Lucas punching the wall when he got the news. The board meeting was held in the Skyview conference room. All glass walls and overpriced espresso machines no one actually used. I wore navy. No makeup but red lipstick. Power in restraint. Lucas was already there, jittering in his seat. He didn't make eye contact. Greg began with numbers. Revenue projections back on track. Johnson Klein renewed. Southwest Corridor saving us nearly $5 million annually after the Quick Thread rollout. Then he looked directly at me. Effective immediately, Melanie Cruz is being promoted to Senior Vice President of Strategy and Operations. The room was silent. Even Dana blinked. Greg wasn't finished. She'll be taking over regional logistics, client relations, and innovation development. Lucas will remain as a director under her leadership. My ears rang. Not from shock, from satisfaction. Lucas? Demoted. Under me. I turned and met his eyes. For the first time in our lives, he looked small. Not angry, not smug. Just small. He tried to speak. Probably something defensive, something dramatic. But I stood and addressed the board before he could. I appreciate the opportunity, but more than that, I appreciate the space I was given to build something quietly. My team didn't ask for glory. They asked for purpose. And now they'll get both. Afterward, I walked out into the hallway, heart pounding. Dana caught up with me. You know, she said, your brother pitched me on running this company one day. I smiled. He pitches. I build. She nodded. Good answer. We'll be watching. And just like that, the door closed behind her. Later that evening, as the office lights dimmed and most of the floor emptied out, I returned to the lab. Jamie was still typing away. Tasha was sketching. Henry had dozed off with a report open on his chest. And Lena? She'd brought in a cake. Frosted words, SVP, still very powerful. We laughed. We cried. We toasted with vending machine coffee and sparkling water someone had stashed in a drawer. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about finally being seen, being heard, and never letting someone like Lucas define us again. But make no mistake, I did take pleasure in knowing he'd be reporting to me. After all those years of being his shadow, his safety net, his silent cleanup crew, I'd become the storm. And that chair he thought he'd earned? Well, I was just warming it up. There's a particular kind of silence that only happens in corporate hallways. It's not peaceful. No, it's surgical, controlled. The sound of whispers being swallowed, eye contact being dodged, allegiances being recalibrated mid-step. That's the sound I heard the morning Lucas walked into the office to find his entire team had disappeared. Well, not disappeared exactly, just relocated. To me, it didn't happen all at once. Loyalty doesn't shift like a wind gust. It drips, drop by drop, until the dam breaks. It started with Miguel, Lucas's operations lead. Quiet guy, sharp mind. He showed up to one of our lab meetings with an excuse about cross-team alignment. Then Brianna, his client success manager, slid into my Slack messages late one night with a polite, "If you ever need support on retention strategy, I'd love to be considered." One by one, they started floating over, not because I asked, but because they were tired. Tired of chaos. Tired of credit being stolen. Tired of Lucas waltzing through failure while they held the roof up with chewing gum and crossed fingers. When I officially stepped into the SVP role, I didn't announce anything. I invited. Anyone who wants to build something that works, something that matters, my door is open. And they came. Willingly. Quietly. In twos and threes. Like the tide changing. By Friday morning, Lucas's floor was a ghost town. His inbox was full of resignation emails, not from the company, just from him. People politely asking to be reassigned under my org chart. He didn't show up to the Monday sync. Didn't show up to Tuesdays either. By Wednesday, I knew why. He was avoiding walking into his old office. Because now? It had my name on the door. Let me set the scene. That office, his precious corner sanctuary, had been his ego's throne for nearly 6 years. Glass walls, eucalyptus diffuser on the shelf, an espresso machine he never cleaned, and one of those expensive Herman Miller chairs that he told everyone was good for his back, but was really just good for looking important. Facilities had updated the plaque that morning. Melanie Cruz, SVP Strategy and OPS. No fanfare, just clean brass lettering, sharp, final. I arrived early that day, slid into his old chair like I'd always belonged there, because the truth was, I had. For years, I'd been doing the thinking while he did the talking. I'd been holding the blueprint while he scribbled on napkins. Now, it was my turn. I had his budget spreadsheets open, a disaster, by the way. Overages, phantom vendors, and about $900,000 in miscellaneous line items that looked suspiciously like vanity projects. I was mid-scroll when the door opened. He didn't knock. Of course not. He walked in like a man walking into a bad dream. Stopped. Stared. I didn't look up right away. Just let the silence steep like tea. Then finally, I lifted my eyes, tilted my head, and said, evenly, like I was reading a grocery list, "I'm auditing this first." He blinked. "Excuse me?" I gestured at the screen. "Your department budget. Or, my department now, technically." I watched the recognition ripple through him, the chair, the screen, the plaque, the team that wasn't his anymore, the kingdom gone. He squared his shoulders, trying to salvage the moment. "You've made your point." I smiled, just barely. "Lucas, this isn't about making points. This is about making progress, something you never quite managed." He flinched. It was small, a blink, a breath, a microsecond of pain, but I saw it. Then he tried to lean on old tactics. "You're not better than me, you know. You just waited for a slip-up." I leaned back in the chair, his chair, and folded my hands. Number, I waited for everyone to see what I'd always known. You were never leading. You were just standing in the spotlight while the rest of us built the stage. He didn't stay long after that. Said something clipped about transition meetings and graceful exits. But we both knew. His influence was over. The power had drained out of him like air from a punctured balloon. The office stayed quiet after he left. The kind of quiet that feels earned. I looked out the window. Downtown Austin glimmered below, full of noise and ambition, and noise masquerading as ambition. But in here, in this corner of glass and reclaimed wood and reclaimed authority, it was mine now. And not because someone handed it to me, because I built it. Quietly, carefully, without permission, but with purpose. That afternoon, I gathered the new team. No big speech. Just coffee, chairs in a circle, and one agenda item. Let's rebuild this place from the inside out. We talked about transparency, about mentorship, about not rewarding people for noise over substance. I said, "You want to impress me? Show me a process that works and the humility to change it if it doesn't." They listened. Really listened. And when they left, there was light in their eyes again. That was the win. Not the title, not the nameplate, not the office with a better view. The real win was watching the people who had been treated like background characters step forward and take their place at the table. And I was just getting started. The office felt different now. Not louder, not flashier, just lighter. There was air in the place. The kind you can breathe all the way into your ribs without choking on ego or performance reviews written by people who never watched you actually work. You could hear laughter in the break room again. Real laughter, not the performative kind people used to put on like armor. Someone even brought in a dog on Friday, and no one called HR. But the biggest change? People stopped looking over their shoulders. Because the fear was gone. The fear of being undercut. The fear of being talked over. The fear of putting your name on a bold idea only for someone else to wear it like a trophy. That fear had packed its things and left right around the time Lucas did. I didn't start with grand gestures. No glossy press release. No big culture reset campaign. Instead, I started where it mattered. At the bones. Mentorship was first. Every director got a mentee, not just to advise, but to sponsor. I made it crystal clear. If you're in a position of power, your job isn't just to climb, it's to pull. Then came recruiting. I wasn't interested in buzzwords or cookie-cutter resumes. I wanted life-tested women. The ones who'd taken career breaks to raise kids, who'd freelanced for a decade and knew how to stretch a dollar and a deadline. The ones who'd been passed over, underestimated, told they were not quite the right fit. I hired them, and they thrived. We doubled our output in a quarter. Attrition dropped by 60%. Revenue projections were up. $18 million over forecast, and we were just getting started. But none of that made the headlines. What did? A photo, snapped by someone on their way to the elevators. It showed me and our new director of engineering, a woman in her late 50s, second career, first leadership role, standing side by side, sleeves rolled, whiteboard full of ideas behind us. The caption? Real leaders don't look down, they look around. It went viral in our industry, and suddenly, the lab exile became the blueprint. I was coming out of a quarterly review one afternoon, good numbers, strong feedback, a roadmap that finally meant something, when I saw him. Lucas. He looked different. Smaller somehow. No blazer. No entourage. Just a man alone with his regret. He was waiting by the elevators, staring down at his phone like it owed him an explanation for his life. When he looked up and saw me, he hesitated. Then he stepped forward. "Melanie," he said, voice quiet. "You were right." There was a time, not long ago, when I would have melted at that. When I would have taken that scrap of validation and folded it into my chest like a love letter from the universe. But that time was over. I looked him in the eye and said, "You weren't." Then I stepped into the elevator and left him standing there, not as revenge, but as closure, because I didn't need his approval anymore. I had my team, my voice, my vision, my chair, and I wasn't giving any of it back. So if you've ever been overlooked, talked over, shuffled to the side because someone thought they could shine brighter by dimming you, let me tell you something. You don't need to raise your voice to raise your power. You don't need a title to lead. You just need a vision and the nerve to see it through. Like the video, leave a comment, subscribe,